Hello, welcome to Talking Europe from the European Commission, this time in Brussels. Now, you might think that the EU had quite enough to keep itself occupied with its own 28 member states. However, the bloc also keeps a very close eye on its nearest neighbours, North Africa, the Middle East, Ukraine, the Western Balkans, to name but a few. Well, the EU invests over €2 billion each year in these countries, with a particular focus on political stability, migrants, supporting economies. You might also see it as, in part, reducing threats to Europe itself. Now, it is a very big dossier. The man holding it is the Commissioner for Neighbourhood Policy and Enlargement Negotiations, Johannes Hahn. And there's a particular focus for the Commissioner and his team this week on Tunisia, with a high-level meeting here in Brussels, redefining the relationship for the near future. Commissioner Hahn, thank you very much for being with us.
Happy to be here.
I would like to start with something that's been a major news headline of the last couple of days, which concerned two of the places in your neighbourhood dossier, Israel and the Palestinian territories. As we know, the US Embassy was moved to Jerusalem on Monday, and on the same day, dozens of Palestinians were shot dead by Israeli forces at the Gaza border fence. We've heard the High Representative for the EU, Federica Mogherini, issuing a statement calling for restraint, appropriate use of force, and for Palestinian leaders not to incite violence. However, some voices are calling for more than this. Can we expect to hear stronger words or any action from the EU?
First, I mean, it's a tragedy. This is exactly not what we want to see, quite the opposite. We would like to see peace, and this is exactly what we try to achieve. And I personally believe there is no alternative to the two-state solution. This is what is the opinion of all the EU member states. We are working for that. We are in particular supporting financially the Palestinian authorities, but they also have to do their homework in terms of quasi reunifying the two parts of Palestine in order to be a reliable interlocutor also for Israel. But I think it's becoming more and more obvious that Europe has to care about its immediate neighborhood, because others like the US have lost their credibility in terms of being an honest broker.
You say the US has lost its credibility. Might the EU, you think, step up then in terms of the actual peace process itself? It's been more or less dormant or even dead for the last couple of years.
Well, we have to see what can be done, what is possible. I mean, the whole conflict is ongoing for decades, but is today again embedded in a broader, so to say, very explosive situation, thinking about Iran, Syria, etc. So the situation is very, very serious, and I think Europe has to play a very active role in this.
Now, your part of the Commission, as I said, has a huge budget, and several, dozens of millions are spent in the Palestinian territories on aid. Israel is also a major trade partner with the EU. That perhaps could give the EU a certain amount of leverage in this region in trying to get the two sides to behave in ways that the EU would see as conducive to that peace process. Is the EU, you think, going to start using that leverage in any way?
Well, we have tried to do this in the past, in particular when it comes to the Palestinian authorities, and we have, under my control, restructured also the support, in particular to the Gaza Strip, in order to create more, or to provide more efficiency in terms of the money, how it is used. But I have to admit, money is not everything in this, and it's about looking for a political solution which is based on the mutual respect of each other. In that respect, I think a facilitator can only be somebody who is seen as neutral in a good sense. Europe has and will have also in the future a huge reputation, track record, and once again, it's in our interest.
And just one final question on this. We have heard that a couple of European states could be considering moving their embassies to Jerusalem as well. High Representative Mogherini has been very clear that the EU's position is that that shouldn't happen. I'm talking about Romania and the Czech Republic particularly. Do you foresee any sort of punishments or sanctions on EU member states that might step out of line with that?
Member states are sovereign in this respect, but of course it's an ongoing internal discussion. It's about really sticking to the common agreement about our attitude, and I think it would be important to keep the 28 together because this is a very strong signal.
All right, well, let's move on to the EU's relationship with Tunisia. Now, this is the country where the Arab Spring was started with the so-called Jasmine Revolution many years ago now. The European Union has an association agreement with Tunisia. Can you tell us a bit more about what was announced this week? I know that there's 300 million euros this year and every year until 2020 of funding going into Tunisia. What's that going on?
Yeah, first I have to say that for us Tunisia is, so to say, very symbolic because, as you rightly said, the Arab Spring started there, and it's so far the only country, the only Arabic country with a strong democratic structure. But they are nevertheless quasi at the beginning of this whole process, and we have to support them, to help them, assist them. And this is why we invest a lot also for showing it's possible to combine Islamic background with democracy. And for that purpose, we have started to increase our financial contribution. I have to tell you, Tunisia is facing some absorption problems because the money is only available if certain, call it incentives, conditions are in place.
Indeed, we'll probably talk about those conditions and incentives in just a couple of minutes. I wanted to give our viewers a bit of a better idea of where that EU money is going, what kind of involvement the European Union has in Tunisia. Our reporter Luke Brown recently went to Tunisia to see some of the projects that are getting European support.
It's not just the showroom that's unique. These cars are all made in Tunisia. Over 2,000 vehicles have rolled off the Wally's production line over the past decade. Assembled by 35 local craftsmen, it's the only African brand car which is exported to Europe.
Everything is done by hand here. We decided to invest in people, not machines.
Starting at €11,000, the Iris has a French-built engine. Wally's also received European funds to improve the chassis. That local expertise and international backing means the Wally's car is a model for Tunisian entrepreneurs.
Every head of a company and every company in Tunisia has a role to play in encouraging young people to stay. Because if we don't do it, who will? Europe has a role to play, but Tunisia has to seize its destiny and stop waiting around for a solution to come.
The private sector has been a vital cog in Tunisia's beleaguered economy since the revolution of 2011. The EU has distributed microcredits to 61,000 young Tunisian entrepreneurs. Here at the Fab 6 Labs Innovation Incubator, promising startups receive assistance and financing, a leg up that is hoped to spark a trickle-down effect.
This kind of lab is crucial to the development of our new Tunisia because, first of all, in Tunisia, before, what we had is a lot of brilliant people who were isolated and they didn't know each other. And we had people that could have just helped if they knew somebody needed help. So this lab brings out together all the young talent in Tunisia.
Tunisia is the biggest single beneficiary of EU external aid, receiving €300 million a year. The EU's Commissioner for Neighbourhood Policy, Johannes Hahn, announced in March a further €25 million for 1,000 startups. The Co-Gîte co-working space is home to 80 startups. It's at the heart of Tunisia's nascent tech scene.
The idea is to create a community of doers and game changers in Tunisia, and it's important to give people hope here today. Co-Gîte is a vector of that hope. It's an ambitious role, one that the revolution gave us, but it's not just that, we grabbed it.
In return for its financial support, the EU wants Tunisia to pursue its promised reforms. A roadmap of reforms was on the agenda when Commissioner Hahn met with the Prime Minister, Youssef Chahed. For the EU, Tunisia is a model for the region, but it is handicapped by chronic political instability, with 6 prime ministers since the revolution.
It's also understandable that such a young democracy has its difficulties, and therefore it's more than important and justified to help them, to assist them, and not to stand aside. My general policy is guided by the slogan, if you like, either we export stability or we import instability.
Given the flow of migrants towards Europe, it's in the EU's interests to ensure Tunisia remains an example to follow. And Tunisia is a key diplomatic hub in the region. The EU's delegation for Libya is based in Tunis.
Commissioner Hahn, we heard you yourself saying in that report that either we export stability or we import instability. Is that the main thing that this is about not having countries on the EU's doorstep where we could have all sorts of terrorism, insecurity brewing that can very easily, as we know, cross the Mediterranean?
Exactly. I mean, if you look around Europe, it's not only in the south, but also in the east. One of our biggest challenges is that the difference in the welfare level between us and our immediate neighborhood is too steep. And this is triggering a permanent kind of threat that many people want to come to Europe. And we can only mitigate all this and improve the situation if we really invest in the economic development. And I think linked to an economic development, you have also, in particular, if you take Tunisia as an example, improvements in the rule of law, in democracy, etc. But the main, so to say, goal is definitely stabilizing countries by pushing the economy.
Some people looking from the outside, they might well say, OK, Tunisia, you're putting lots of money into it, but we remember very clearly the Bardo attack, the attack on the tourists in Sousse. A lot of people still reluctant to go to Tunisia to spend their money there, probably wondering, really, should my European money be sent to this country? Is it going down a black hole?
We have invested a lot in security-related measures in the country itself, but also at their borders, addressing the migration cases, but also addressing the terrorist attack, because Tunisia is very much depending on tourism, and such attacks had immediately an impact on the number of tourists. Fortunately, they came back already. Last year was already a good year. This year should an even better one, but this is something where the country is very vulnerable. So you have to address it to provide equipment, training facilities, etc. Here we have to invest, but also ask the country to provide a more conducive legal framework for doing business. According
to Italian figures and UN figures, there has been a spike in the number of people coming from Tunisia in recent months, and not just using it as a jumping off point, it's actually Tunisians leaving their country. We know the economic situation in Tunisia has degraded. Is that giving you cause for alarm? Because, of course, the investments and the projects that you're talking about, they do take a long time, several years, to really bed in.
Yeah, first, I think it's important to clarify Tunisia was never the main hub for migrants to come to Europe. This was always Libya. But you are referring rightly to the internal economic situation. This is why we are pushing a lot that they are providing the necessary once again, conducive conditions for doing business, for attracting foreign investments.
Well, just before we wrap up the interview, I'd like to talk about another big part of your dossier, the Western Balkans. There's been a big summit in Sofia in Bulgaria this week. Negotiations with several Balkan countries about joining the EU are underway. Serbia, Montenegro fairly advanced, others much further back in the process. However, we keep hearing about issues in these countries, corruption, governance, for example. Is membership of the EU really a realistic dream for these countries within the foreseeable future?
Yeah, one has to say and to be clear that already today all these Western Balkan countries are surrounded by EU member states. So it would be a kind of consolidation if they are once members of the Union.
And do you see that the potential of European Union membership is proving to be an adequate incentive? Yeah, are you seeing the changes you would like to see?
First, we have published our strategy in February, indicating that each country in the region has a perspective, but the whole process, and I prefer to talk about the process and not only negotiations, is merit-based. So it's also not about getting any kind of discount. So it's in our own interest to push them, help them, assist them, but it's not a free lunch. they have to deliver.
Very final question then on enlargement. Angela Merkel said last year that membership for Turkey is now off the table. Its membership bid has been going right back to the 1980s. Is that indeed the case? Is the door now closed to Turkey?
Yeah, the current, so to say, decision is that under the current circumstances and prevailing situation, no further chapters will be opened, and de facto the negotiations are frozen. And we have been asked, and I have done it, to adjust the pre-accession financing to the current state of play.
Do you think that it is likely to come back onto the table under President Erdogan?
I mean, if you look at the development of this country, in particular in the last couple of years, under the leadership of Mr. Erdogan, one can have serious doubts about this. But I hope that after the presidential elections, after, so to say, things are clarified, probably from the point of Mr. Erdogan, there could be some kind of reflection concerning the future of Turkey. It's not necessarily in terms of EU accession, but it's in terms of giving people the opportunity to pursue their own interests, their own, so to say, wishes. Because also for Turkey, it's about stability from a European perspective. If you look into the geostrategic situation of the country, the economic situation, it creates a lot of concerns on our side, and we have every interest to stabilize this country also from a European perspective.
Johannes Hahn, thank you very much for talking to us today on Talking Europe.
Welcome.
And thank you very much for watching the programme. We'll see you next time for more European news here on France 24.
The annual meetings of the African Development Bank will take place from May 21 to 25, 2018 in Busan, Korea. The theme, Accelerating Africa's Industrialization. Heads of state, governors of the bank, government ministers will be joined by an estimated 4,000 participants from the public and private sectors in Africa, Korea, and around the world. Share our ambition to unleash Africa's full potential.